Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, saluting Earth Day on April 22nd with an ongoing commitment to help offset carbon emissions with sustainable harvesting of Missouri forests. Details at choosewood.com.
This is St. Louis on the Air from St. Louis Public Radio. I'm Elaine Cha.
And he pointed to me roughly where it was, and I went up and I made the walk with one of his dogs. And we walked up the fence line, and I came across this area that if I weren't looking for a cemetery, I would never have recognized as a cemetery.
You wanted to capture the flag waving just right in the wind. Can you give an example of another way that art or craftsmanship shows up in the photographs that you've taken? I'm Elaine Cha. Early this year, our station's health reporter, Sarah Fenton, shared a screenshot of an STL Reddit post titled Weird Request. The post was made by a woman seeking help getting a photo of a very particular, and to most, a peculiar sort. One STLPR staff member responded to Sarah Fenton's Slack share. Dennis Bentley, System Support Administrator. Dennis makes sure our infotech system's myriad programs run smoothly with us rather than running amok on us. As it turned out, some other wholesome soul beat Dennis to the punch, answering the Redditor's unusual ask. But it revealed something about our colleague we might not have learned otherwise. He's an experienced headstone photographer. Dennis joined me on the show in January to give us more details about what headstone photography is and how he does it. Dennis, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me on.
All right, what was that Reddit request?
I saw that. It was what I considered as not unusual at all or weird. As I responded to that Slack message, I have an inbox full of similar requests for the same reasons. I think in this case, the person said that they lived in California or far away and could not personally see or attend the ceremony or see the burial, but they would love a photograph of the headstone. Which to me didn't sound weird at all, and I said as much.
And I agree, it's not that weird. Weird is in the eye of the beholder. Now, what or who first inspired you to take up headstone photography in the first place?
Well, I didn't even know it was a thing. I started out, I moved here to Jefferson County 16, 17 years ago. I'd never been here before, never been, don't have any family there or anything like that. And I was getting to know the area a little better. And I was going out to all the noted conservation sites and trails and parks and things like that. And I usually dragged my camera along. I had a good camera. And I was pretty much had used up all my photography on the places that were available to me, and I was in between things. And then I heard a story on NPR, as it turns out, from the creator of a website called Find a Grave. And he talked about, well, we're looking, we need volunteers to go out and basically just document or photograph headstones. And I thought, well, that's something I can do. I'm already mostly doing that, dragging my camera around to interesting places anyhow.
Do you remember your first photograph?
Actually, yes. My first one was actually before I heard the NPR story. And was when I was doing some research into Jefferson County, and I came across a web page that had an article about the Poor Farm in Jefferson County. And I was intrigued by this article and found out the place still existed and that it was only like 4 or 5 miles from my own home. And I just got up one Saturday morning and, I contacted the Historical Society and they gave me all the directions and told me how to get there. But they also told me that that struck fear in the heart of an introvert that I would have to ask permission to get back there because they'd already portioned out the land.
Okay.
And so I got up one Saturday morning and went out there and knocked on this stranger's door at 9 o'clock in the morning on Saturday morning, and asked him and told him what I was going to do and what I wanted to do and all that. And he pointed to me roughly. He'd only lived there a few years, and he pointed to me roughly where it was. And I went up and I made the walk with one of his dogs, and we walked up the fence line. And I came across this area that if I weren't looking for a cemetery, I would never have recognized as a cemetery. Mm-hmm. There were never any established headstones, or as we know them, headstones. There were no markers.
And is that associated then with the name of the place, Poor Farm?
Yes. In fact, some of the buildings with the Poor Farm, from the Poor Farm days, which wrapped up in the 1930s, some of those buildings still exist, and this was across the road, and the county had sold off the land or most around it, and they had separated from the sale this little triangle of land up in the woods as being the area where the cemetery existed.
Since that time, you have 3,100 photos uploaded to find a grave. Mm-hmm. And 91 of them are volunteer photos that you've taken. Mm-hmm. So at what point did you begin posting to find a grave?
It was shortly after hearing the story on NPR. In fact, I think it was the weekend following that story. I was excited about it. And where I live, just outside of Hillsboro, I knew where there was a cemetery, so I went to it. And with the printed out requests and and all that, so it was pretty much immediately, and it was almost every weather friendly weekend after that for several years.
Walk us through your process. So first, can you tell us about the stuff you prepare before going out to take headstone photos? For instance, I do want to mention you yourself are a veteran, mm-hmm. and you carry flags for decorating photos of military veterans' headstones. Mm-hmm. What else do you carry with you?
I carry, and I didn't know originally, this fanny pack built itself over the course of years. What I learned to take with me was a bottle or two of water, especially if it's warm outside. A snack of some kind, even though I don't often do that. I do carry an American flag, small like you would see around Memorial Day. And in case a veteran's stone doesn't have one, I actually put it there for the photograph itself. Mm-hmm. I don't leave them there. I take it back out with me. I would say that there's one other thing that I do, one ritual that I do before I head out to these cemeteries, is I make sure to visit a restroom.
Oh, that's very practical.
Because as a rule, cemeteries generally don't have public facilities. Mm-hmm. But it's just something I've learned. And I've also learned to recognize where the nearest facility is.
Okay, let's talk about some of the pictures themselves. Mm-hmm. One of your many photos shows a nicely engraved, well-kept headstone of a man who lived from 1900 to 1956. The stone sits underneath a very small handmade structure that has wooden legs supporting roofing shingles. And in front of that, there's a very springy bouquet of blue hydrangeas. Did the flowers in the structure attract your attention?
Actually, yes. This is unusual and not unusual. I'm looking at the picture you're referring to. The structure itself, I don't see very often, but I do often see occasionally people will leave behind, or they will build something around a headstone. Solar lights are not unusual. items from that person's life. It's not unusual to see. I even have a photo of one headstone that actually has a full bottle, an airplane bottle of whiskey.
Oh, yes. Spirits for the spirits.
The spirits for the spirit. And but this one I can't tell you a lot about. I don't know. But it's sort of unusual and not unusual at the same time. I understand it. I understand the thinking. They're trying to protect the headstone. But I doubt that the shingles will last as long as the headphone itself.
Sure. What lasts these days anyway?
Right.
Well, is there anything that you bring with you sometimes? I did see on your Find a Grave profile something about flowers. Do you take flowers sometimes?
I don't take flowers in. I have a general rule, and Find a Grave does not require oversight. In other words, I'm pretty much can do.
You're a free agent.
I'm a free agent.
Okay.
And I sign no contract. I don't have a boss. I don't have a territory. But I try not to actually physically touch the headstones, I try not to desecrate them whatsoever. And I think me putting flowers there could possibly be seen as, oh, we didn't want that.
Sure. We're speaking now with Dennis Bentley, who is a hobby headstone photographer and also the systems and IT administrator here at St. Louis Public Radio. One last thing about the photos. Now, I understand that one of them that you took of a World War II veteran's headstone required 5 shots because you wanted to capture the flag waving just right in the wind. Can you give an example of another way that art or craftsmanship shows up in the photographs that you've taken?
I've been a hobby photographer longer than I've been a hobby headstone photographer. I started taking pictures when I was in high school. So I've always been familiar or leaned towards the concepts of framing and rotational angle and light and all, then shadow and reflection. And yes, there was this one that I wrote about that gave me some trouble. It was a windy day, and the flag kept obscuring the name on the headstone. And I ended up taking, sitting there patiently waiting for the wind to blow in the right direction. Well, like I said, I don't like to touch the headstones. But I couldn't. I was about to get angry with this flag for not getting out of the way. Okay. But finally it did, and I think the picture turned out fairly well.
You said that your inbox is full of requests for headstone photography. What kinds of reactions do you get when you fulfill those requests?
Usually, most of the photography I do of headstones is preemptive. I have no request for them. Now the handful that I have actually resulted from a request. I've received nothing but sincere gratitude. I have to say the people requesting them are not doing so for evil purposes. They genuinely would like to see it. And so the words of thanks, even though it's not 100%, sometimes they hear nothing. Yeah. But it's a self-satisfying hobby. The few times that I do hear back from a requester, it has been sincere and kind.
On days that you have specific gravestones to find, how many are you looking for typically?
That has changed over the years. Rereading through some of my blogs recently, I start out with a handful, 10 or 12 requests, and I'm looking for, and I'm looking in cemeteries that I've learned to look in smaller cemeteries too. So the list names 4, 5, 10, but this is not what drives me. Have
folks you've encountered at cemeteries responded in different ways to what you're doing?
I try to avoid people as a general rule of life, not just with headstone photography, but as a general rule. I tend not to want to interfere. If there's someone else, and I should point out that it is relatively rare to run across other people at cemeteries. Mm-hmm. They really don't get visited very often. And when I do come across someone, I try to steer around them, give them a wide berth, mm-hmm. and not confront them. Now, I have interacted with a few of them, but usually it's just a elevator nod or something like that, or just a lower mouth grin or whatever, okay. Because I don't know what stage of the grieving process they're going through or what their motivations for being there is.
So quiet acknowledgement.
It's a quiet acknowledgement.
Yeah. Mm. Is there a memory that stands out about maybe a specific gravestone that you were looking for, or a find that aligned with something else that was going on in the world or in life that just struck you?
A few. Well, yes, there's one incident where I was actually in the local cemetery, the Hillsborough City Cemetery. And I've been there enough times where I kind of know it like the back of my hand. I feel it's my home cemetery. And one day I was there, and I spotted out of the corner of my eye a lady, a buttoned-up lady holding some flowers, and she was apparently looking around, browsing. She was looking down at stones, moving on, browsing at another stone. And I kind of gave her a wide berth at first, but I could see that we were going to be meeting somewhere in the middle.
Okay.
And so I just basically said, hi there, because I worry that sometimes someone like me who's just going from stone to stone taking pictures is going to be seen as an intruder of some kind. Mm-hmm. I'm very aware of that at all times. And I didn't know how she would react. And as it turned out, she asked for my help. And she says, I'm looking for, and she mentioned the man's name. And she says, I used to live around here, but I don't anymore. And I've just not been here in a while. And I said, well, what can you tell me about the grave? And she says, well, he just passed away less than a year ago. They put his headstone down. She knows this. And she says, and I'm here because it's his birthday. And she says, even though he was not my son, I know his parents and keep in touch with them, but they live in California now also. And they couldn't make the trip, and they would really like to, And so I actually stopped looking at the names on the headstones and started looking for other signs that I'd picked up on, which was that I knew in that particular cemetery that if it had only been there for a year or less, that it would not have covered over with grass, that it would still be, you would still see some loose dirt around it and all that. It would not have grown over. So I just basically started looking around, and within a few minutes, I actually discovered it.
Some detective work there.
Well, yeah, a lot of it is, yes.
What have you learned about these cemeteries and how these spaces change over time?
I have learned quite a bit. Not really a lot of interesting stuff, but to me, quite a bit. I have learned a lot about the physical structure of headstones and about the history of headstones. And I've learned that regardless of whatever headstone you may go out and purchase for your family member, it will not last forever. I'd say even stones that were erected in the 1860s are starting to just fade. Even some from the 1920s and 30s are starting to fade. And I've also learned about myself that cemeteries don't really creep me out much, but I'm perfectly aware, readily aware that that is me, and just me. It actually does give the heebie-jeebies to a lot of people.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing what people respond with. I suspect there are more people who share your openness to this. Dennis Bentley is a hobby headstone photographer who contributes to Find a Grave, where people the world over post, search, and request photos of lost loved ones. His day job is keeping St. Louis Public Radio's IT in order as our station's beloved systems support administrator. Thank you for this treat, Dennis.
Well, thank you.
That was my conversation with Dennis Bentley. Since he talked with us, Dennis has taken even more pictures. His current gravefinder total is now just one short of 5,500 posts.
Today's episode was produced by Aaron Dorr.
Audio engineering and podcast design by Aaron.
Our executive producer is Alex Hoyer.
St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio. Understanding starts here.
St. Louis on the Air proudly supports local artists by using music from Life Creative Group.
Do you find yourself regularly listening to episodes of St. Louis on the Air? Suggest us to a friend you think might enjoy our conversations. And leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the simplest way to help people discover our show. Thanks.
St. Louis Public Radio is a member-supported service of the University of Missouri St. Louis.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, saluting Earth Day on April 22nd with an ongoing commitment to help offset carbon emissions with sustainable harvesting of Missouri forests. Details at choosewood.com.